It happened on a Friday night in Los Angeles, a charity gala where half of Hollywood seemed to have gathered. Cameras flashed, champagne flowed, and laughter filled the room. On the surface, it was elegant and polished, another glamorous evening under chandeliers and designer suits. But beneath that glittering calm, tension was brewing, the kind that could set a room on fire. Jamie Dornan had arrived late. He wasn't supposed to attend, but an old friend from the film industry had convinced him to make an appearance. He looked every bit the movie star, crisp tuxedo, quiet confidence, that familiar mix of charm and mystery that followed him everywhere. But the calm in his expression vanished the moment his eyes landed across the room. There she was, Dakota Johnson. She was radiant, dressed in a silver gown that shimmered under the light, her smile effortless, her laughter soft. And next to her, holding her waist just a little too tightly, was Chris Martin. For a few seconds, Jamie froze. The crowd blurred, conversations melted into background noise. All he could see was Dakota, and the man beside her. "Are you all right, mate?" someone asked quietly. Jamie blinked, forcing a smile. "Yeah, just need a drink." But everyone who knew him well could see it. That flicker of anger behind his calm, that tightening of his jaw. For years, Jamie and Dakota had shared something undefinable. It wasn't a romance, not officially, but a connection forged through trust, vulnerability, and unspoken understanding. Seeing someone else, especially Chris, invade that space so easily felt like a spark against dry wood. As the evening wore on, the air grew heavier. Jamie tried to avoid them, moving from one conversation to another, but it was impossible. The crowd was too small, the tension too large. When fate, or maybe irony, brought them face to face at the edge of the ballroom, everything stopped. "Jamie," Dakota greeted softly, her voice warm but cautious. "It's been a while." He smiled, polite but distant. "It has." Chris extended a hand. "Hey man," he said, easygoing as always. "Didn't know you'd be here." Jamie shook his hand briefly. "Neither did I." For a moment, it was civil. Polite smiles, surface-level words. But the air around them was thick, the kind of silence that hums right before thunder. A few feet away, photographers were snapping candid shots. And that's when it happened, a small comment that cracked the surface. Chris, half joking, said, "You know, Dakota's been so busy lately, I barely get to see her. I have to keep showing up just to make sure she remembers me." He laughed, but Jamie didn't. His expression shifted, almost imperceptibly, a slight narrowing of the eyes, a breath through clenched teeth. Dakota felt it too. "Chris," she said quietly, a warning tone. But it was too late. Jamie took a step closer, voice calm but edged with something dangerous. "You should know when to stop, Chris." The words were soft, but they sliced through the music and conversation like glass. The people nearest turned their heads, sensing something happening. Chris's smile faltered. "Excuse me?" Jamie's gaze didn't waver. "You're making it sound like she's someone you have to control. Maybe think about how that sounds before you say it." For a moment, even the background music seemed to fade. Chris let out a short laugh, though there was no humor in it. "And maybe you should learn to let go," he said evenly. "She's not your responsibility anymore." That did it. The two men stood inches apart now, the tension so thick it could be felt across the room. Dakota stepped between them, her voice trembling slightly. "Stop, both of you." Her eyes darted from Jamie to Chris, anger, confusion, sadness all mixing in one look. "This isn't the place." Jamie inhaled slowly, breaking the stare first. He looked at Dakota, his voice softer now. "You're right, I'm sorry." Chris crossed his arms. "No need to apologize to me." Jamie's jaw tightened again, but he said nothing. He simply turned, muttered a quiet, "good night," and walked away through the stunned crowd. Cameras flashed, whispers erupted, and within minutes, every gossip reporter in the room had their story. Dakota stood there, frozen for a moment, before quietly saying to Chris, "You didn't have to provoke him." Chris sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. I wasn't provoking anyone, but maybe he needs to realize that chapter's over. Her eyes lowered, her voice breaking almost into a whisper. Some chapters never really end, Chris. They just change. From across the ballroom, Jamie stopped briefly near the exit, glancing back just once. His gaze met Dakota's for a fleeting second, a look full of regret, unspoken words, and a history neither of them could erase. By the next morning, the world would know everything. Headlines screamed across every tabloid and social feed. Tension erupts, fire Jamie Dornan confronts Chris Martin over Dakota Johnson. But none of them could capture what really happened, not the anger, not the heartbreak, not the ache of two people who once belonged to the same world, now standing on opposite sides of it. By morning, Hollywood was roaring. Every outlet, from E! News to Variety, ran the same headline in bold. Tension erupts, fire Jamie Dornan confronts Chris Martin over Dakota Johnson. The story had everything: emotion, scandal, two famous men, and the woman who tied them together. But behind the clickbait chaos, the truth was quieter, and far more complicated. A witness who had been at the gala described the scene perfectly. It wasn't about ego, she said. It was about emotion. You could see it in Jamie's eyes. He wasn't angry because of pride. He was angry because he cared. For Jamie, the night hadn't been about making a scene. It had been years since he'd learned to bury emotion behind calm smiles and polite nods. But seeing Dakota like that, caught between someone she loved and someone who didn't know how to handle that love, had stirred something raw inside him. He hadn't wanted to confront Chris in front of cameras. But Chris's words, "You should learn to let go," had hit like a punch to the chest. Because letting go was exactly what Jamie had been trying to do for years. The day after the confrontation, paparazzi swarmed him outside his home in London. "Jamie, do you regret what happened?" someone shouted. "Was it about Dakota?" Jamie stopped for just a moment. His expression was calm, his tone steady. "Some things get blown out of proportion," he said. "I don't regret standing up for respect." Then he stepped into his car and drove away. His words only added fuel to the fire. Social media lit up again. Jamie didn't deny it. He stood up for her. He's still protecting Dakota. Chris must be fuming right now. Meanwhile, Chris Martin remained silent for days. No statements, no interviews, no Instagram posts. It wasn't until he appeared at a Coldplay rehearsal in Malibu that a reporter finally caught him off guard. "Is it true you and Jamie Dornan fought over Dakota Johnson?" one asked. Chris paused, adjusting his guitar strap, then sighed. "No one fought," he said simply. "Sometimes emotions get loud, that's all." But even as he tried to play it down, insiders said otherwise. According to a close friend of Chris, the confrontation had shaken him. "Chris isn't used to people challenging him," the source explained. Jamie's words hit a nerve because they were true. Chris realized he might have crossed a line. Behind the scenes, Dakota was left to deal with the aftermath. Friends said she'd been heartbroken, not by anger, but by the distance growing between two men who, in different ways, cared for her deeply. Dakota was torn, one source said. She wanted to protect Chris, but she couldn't deny that Jamie was right about boundaries. She told him later that she hated seeing people she loved hurt each other. Days later, Dakota appeared at a press junket promoting her new film. Dressed in black, composed but weary, she faced the inevitable question. "Dakota, there's been a lot of talk about what happened between Jamie and Chris," a journalist said carefully. "Can you clarify what really happened?" Dakota took a deep breath. For a moment, it looked like she might deflect. But then, she smiled softly, sadly, and said, "Sometimes people forget that behind every headline are real human beings. We all care about each other, even when it's messy. I'm grateful to have people in my life who care enough to fight for me, but I wish they didn't have to." Her answer went viral within minutes. Fans flooded social media with empathy. "That's Dakota, graceful even in chaos," one fan wrote. Jamie, who had been filming overseas, reportedly saw the clip. That night, he posted a simple Instagram story, a quote in white text against a black background. "Love doesn't always look like peace. Sometimes it looks like courage." No caption, no explanation, just that. People read it as a response, a confession, and maybe even an apology. But to those who knew him best, it was neither, it was closure. A week later, an anonymous insider told The Hollywood Reporter that Jamie and Chris had met privately at a friend's house in Malibu. No cameras, no publicists, no drama. Just two men sitting on a patio overlooking the ocean, talking for hours. It wasn't heated, the source said. Jamie told Chris he didn't hate him. He just hated seeing Dakota overwhelmed. Chris listened. They shook hands at the end. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. Dakota reportedly joined them later, sitting between them as the sun went down. No words were exchanged at first, just quiet, shared exhaustion. But eventually, she laughed softly and said, "You two are impossible." That moment, one witness said, broke the tension completely. When the trio left, the air between them finally felt lighter. The headlines soon faded, replaced by newer scandals, newer distractions. But for those who had watched the storm unfold, the image lingered. Jamie walking beside Dakota, Chris a few steps behind, all three finally moving in the same direction. Weeks later, Jamie reflected briefly in an interview for GQ. When asked about confrontation, he smiled faintly. "Sometimes standing up for someone isn't about anger," he said. "It's about care. Real tension doesn't come from hate. It comes from love that never really found the right way to exist." And just like that, the chaos quieted. Not with a grand apology, not with a scandalous twist. Just a moment of honesty, shared by three people still learning how to coexist between love, loyalty, and the weight of a world that never stops watching.